a decade and a half earlier. You remember, if you're old enough, unfortunately I am, the end of 50s, beginning of 60s, the end of Algerian war. Only a big conservative like de Gaulle could have given or accepted the independence of Algeria. A left-wing politician would have been, again, attacked as the traitor of a nation and so on. Up to a point, it's the same even in Israel. Only Begin, who had the best conservative, Likud, anti-terrorist, anti-Arab credentials, only he could have concluded the Camp David peace and so on and so on. So I claim Obama will play a similar role, but in the opposite direction. He will not be a great conservative who can do some unpopular progressive leftist task like give independence to a dependent country, conclude peace with communists, whatever. On the opposite, precisely with his leftist authority, credentials, like he is really for the people, he will be able to do things for which a conservative right-winger, whatever you call him, like Bush would have been attacked. For example, did you notice what he now proposed as his latest series of measures to get out of the crisis? He proposed lowering the taxes. I mean, when Bush proposed this, he was attacked from all the left as, oh, you want to get richer, and so on and so on. Obama simply did it. It's accepted because he has leftist credentials. But let me go on so that I don't get lost. So, why are these two events a repetition? What really happened on September 11th, 2001? The Twin Towers were hit, we know. So, but we should remember that 12 years earlier, on November the 9th of 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. What was this epoch, this 12 years? You know how it's fashionable to say that in 1989, 1990, with the disintegration of socialist countries, that the age of utopia was over. Communist utopia, even the Western welfare state utopia, that we were back into hard reality of really existing capitalism. I think it's almost the opposite that it's true. That the true utopia were the 1990s, this golden Clinton era utopia. The idea is which utopia? Well, the Fukuyama utopia. And the utopia that we finally, that history is at an end. And don't make fun here of Fukuyama. I claim that even today, after all the crisis, over 19% of the people, even especially leftists, are, how would we make a predicate out of it, Fukuyamaists? Because what's the idea? The idea of Fukuyamaism is that with liberal democratic capitalism, we found the forum, the best possible, or at least the worst, the least bad forum of social, economic, political order, so that, to cut it shortly, all we can do is make the system a little bit better. More tolerance towards sexual, ethnic minorities, more genuine multiculturalism, and so on and so on. But basically, the forum is found. And isn't this what even the majority of the left de facto thinks? What are the big demands of the left today? Even if they deal with economy, nobody asks any longer the big questions. Can we get out of capitalism as such? Is the parliamentary democracy the ultimate forum? We all silently accept this as the frame. We just in details try to propose for things to get a little bit better. I claim that even those who appear as the most radical progressives today, like, I don't know, in Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, I think that his anti-Americanism is suspicious for me. Because when you focus the enemy not on capitalism but on United States imperialism, this basically means I still stick to the capitalist model, just I want another type of capitalism, a more populist one, and so on and so on. So I claim we effectively were all, and still even are, Fukuyamaists. But two things happened. I think that September 11th and this financial crisis signal the end of this Fukuyamaist, as it were, utopia. Only, to repeat Marx, it had to die, this Fukuyamaist utopia, two times. First, it had to die politically, I think if there is a meaning to September 11th, it is that it's not that we have the formula and we just have to wait slowly that this formula will expand itself and gradually embrace or install itself in all the world. So it's not. I think that history is back in play. History not only in the sense of things are happening, history in the sense of basic fundamental confrontations. In other words, liberal democratic capitalist model cannot be simply universalized. It's not the final answer. But the first, this was made clear at politico-ideological level with September 11th, and I think that what happened with the financial meltdown of 2008 was that the same message was repeated also at the economic level, that this global liberal capitalism found its limit. So, yes, it is a repetition, and I still think it was first a tragedy, then a comedy, but from my youth, I remember Herbert Marcuse, you know, the very popular guy in Frankfurt School, kind of the one who was most connected with student protest, and he wrote an interesting introduction to the new edition of Marx's 18th Brumaire in the mid-60s, where he put another wonderful turn to Marx, when he said, yes, in principle, Marx was right. First is a tragedy, then it's a comedy. But what Marx forgot to add is that the comedy can be sometimes more terrifying than the tragedy. And I think this is, although generally I don't agree too much with Marcuse, this is a very nice insight. What can this mean? Let me give you an extreme example. Concentration camps. I mean, if there ever was a tragedy in the common sense of horrible things happening, it's Auschwitz and so on. But now it will be something horrible that I will say now, but so that you will not accuse me that I am some kind of anti-Semitic, obscene joker. I developed this idea in Jerusalem, where it was fully accepted with some people who had those famous tattoos. How should I put it? No, they got me immediately. That I started with this observation. Did you notice how all good films, relatively good, about Holocaust are comedies? I think there is a deep truth in it. What kind of truth? Tragedy has a limit. When there is a tragedy, things cannot be really horrible. Why? Tragedy, of course, means you are in a catastrophic situation, something horrible happens. But in a tragedy, you have to put it, you still retain a minimum of personal dignity. In tragedy, you can be this sublime tragic victim. Remember Antigone. Yes, I'm born not for death, but for life. It's this tragic moment of sublime beauty. But, how should I put it in vulgar terms, when you are really in deep shit, you are so deeply undermined in your subjective position that you cannot even adopt this tragic position. For example, in a concentration camp, it's obscene here. These old Jews with tattoo signs agreed with me in Jerusalem. It's too obscene to say that they were tragic. They were not tragic victims. You give too much to the Nazis. They were in such a totally desperate, humiliated situation. They regressed to, you know, this term resuscitated by Agamben, so-called Muslims. Ironically, this was the name for the Jews in concentration camp. You read it in Primo Levi. Muslims were called those among the prisoners in Auschwitz who were, how should I put it, reduced to the level of living dead. They no longer had even this survivalist attitude of, let me steal food, let me survive. They just didn't care. And why were they called Muslims? Well, because in the Western common ideological perceptions, the myth of the Muslims was these are people who just accept everything, just pray silently and do nothing. And of course, this totally desperate in the sense of they simply they have lost their will to life. Prisoners in Auschwitz behaved like this, just silently accepted everything, so they were called Muslims. So what I'm saying is that, obscene as it may sound, you only can render this kind of utter loss, utter with a kind of a crazy comedy, where things are comical, but comedy is more desperate, more horrible than tragedy itself. If you don't believe me, let me give you another example. Read Primo Levi. He has a wonderful description of, it's a horrible thing in reality, so-called selection in Auschwitz. You know, once a month, or how all the prisoners had to run in front of a Gestapo doctor. The catch was that Gestapo doctor had a list. You were literally given, I don't know, from half second to 2 seconds. You had to run naked in front of the doctor, and the doctor quickly, with one glance, made a judgment and put you. Are you allowed to leave, or you go to the gas chamber, no? And then Levi gives a wonderful description of how the prisoners prepared themselves for